This is Mayor Buckley on the best show ever, the Maryland Crabs podcast.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
It's the Maryland Crabs, and it's Tim. I'm sitting at my desk at 10:13 p.m. on Tuesday night waiting for the snow to come, seeing if life is going to go on beyond tomorrow or if the world's going to end. I think it's going to end. But being Maryland, what they're predicting is that we're going to have 4 inches of snow in the morning, then we're going to have ice, and then rain, and then I'm assuming a hurricane, then a heat wave, and then lava and explosions. That's my guess. So probably nothing happened. You're sitting there right now laughing at me, which you do on a regular basis anyway. But we're about to jump into an episode right now with Connie DelSignore, who is from the Visit Annapolis in Anne Arundel County. It's the visitor center, remember? And we're going to talk about the AirBNBs. This is a topic that we got from you guys as we watched you battle it out on the Annapolis Forum on Facebook. And again, if you're not part of the Annapolis Forum, it is great theater, so I would jump on and take a look. But that's where you get a lot of the ideas for our podcast. Last week's podcast, in fact, we saw you guys scrapping about the minimum wage. So sat down with Jared Littman, the owner of K&B True Value and the former alderman of Ward 5, and we talked about it. And he talked about why he, as a liberal Democrat, is not in favor of the minimum wage. So we're covering all the topics that affect you people because we love you. Bear that in mind when I tell you this next part. A little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to just come out and say it. We are switching to an every other week schedule, or at least for the immediate future. Instead of going every Thursday, we're now going to go every other Thursday. We just want to kind of pull back and make sure that we're not rushing the episodes just to get one done on Thursdays, that it's a quality episode, that is edited correctly. We've only missed one episode in our 2 years, or 2.5 years, which was Thanksgiving, but we're on our 131st episode now, and we have probably 100 crab cakes that we've done over the last couple of years as well, which are the shorter episodes that are 20 to 30 minutes with comedians and artists who come into Ram's Head and other places around town. So we're still going to be producing those. In fact, John and I made an impressive investment in the last week. We sunk, well, the check we wrote had a comma in it. I'm not going to lie, but we got new equipment to ensure that we could do better phoners with people who are coming in from out of state or from around the state. So the quality is going to be good. It's going to be easier to edit. We can get more of them out. So yes, we're going to an every other week schedule, at least for the time being, but you'll still see a number of the crab cakes coming out as you did before. So don't get disappointed. Don't be discouraged. If you miss us, you can call us. In the meantime, you can find us at themarylandcrabs.com on the internets. If you want to send us some suggestions as people to interview or just kind of reach out to us with any questions or complaints, most likely complaints, it's the info at themarylandcrabs.com. You can find us on Twitter at MD Crabs Podcast. We have a Facebook page. We have a Facebook group. You can subscribe to us. You can rate us. You can recommend us. That's all we want from you people. So buckle in, lean back, listen to the dulcet tones of Tim and John as we sit down with Connie DelSignore from Visit Annapolis in Anne Arundel County.
All right, today we're sitting up on the top of the first block of Main Street. I'm not sure what exactly the number is, but we are here at Visit Annapolis with the CEO, Connie DelSignore. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, thank you. I live in Annapolis. Why wouldn't I be?
Absolutely. You stirred up a hornet's nest last week. I would say...
Yeah, we're just getting into it, aren't we, huh?
A little bit. Oh, hey, why not? And what we're going to be talking about is not so much about visiting Annapolis, which everybody should do, and everybody should know all the great things that we do here in Annapolis and in Arundel County. But the latest brouhaha, and it makes a lot of sense to me personally, and I think probably to you, but we'd like to sort of talk to you a little bit about it, is the study that you commissioned with Rockport Analytics to study the, I called it the VRBO, but it's the short-term vacation STV
rentals
market in Annapolis. And these are the AirBNBs, which I'll probably use as a crutch. I mean, it's sort of like
people generally
Band-Aid. It's AirBNB,
yes,
but there are plenty others. There's VRBO. There's several other ones that are doing that. And I got to say that the report was shocking to me on any number of ways. people are squawking all on social media saying, oh my gosh, the government's taxing us again and the whole 9 yards. And hopefully we can get down to the bottom of it. What prompted you to do this?
Well, I've been living with short-term rental research for the last 3 years. I was at a conference, and the then vice president of AirBNB made a presentation. And it was pretty impressive because he talked about the fact that they really wanted to work with communities, and they were getting a lot of heat. They were disruptors and so on. But at the end of his talk, he said, I am available. Here is my phone number. Call me if you want to know anything. So I called. He answered the phone, and I invited him to come here and speak to us. Senator Astle at the time was working with me on the idea of short-term rental legislation for taxing and permitting purposes. And over the next 6 months, we met with some of their lobbyists and their lawyers, and they were very committed to expanding their reach, of course. And in fact, at one meeting, they offered that if we wanted to get started right away, they would collect the money and put it in escrow until our bill passed in the legislature, which was going to be a slam dunk. So that's how we got started. In the meantime, I was reading a lot about other cities and some of their struggles and how the idea was such a simple one, but as with most things, it got crazier and crazier.
Well, it is. You said that it was the vice president of the Airbnb said that he's willing to work with the municipalities in, I'm assuming, whatever capacity, which is really Airbnb is very similar to Uber or Lyft, and they're the disruptors of an existing industry. Mm-hmm. Uber and Lyft are the bane of the taxi industry, and these are sort of the bane of the hotel industry to a degree. But they're willing to work. Uber wasn't initially. I mean, they were like, no, we're a tech company. We're not going to be talking about that. And
Airbnb really saw that as a negative. He referenced that many times when he was speaking, saying, we are not like that. We really want to avoid that and work with you all. And of course, at the time, all they wanted to do was to collect the sales and use taxes and pass them on. And then they thought everyone would be happy.
Well, it came down to taxes at that point, for the most part, is that it wasn't just that it was a disruptor, and it wasn't that it was disrupting the other industries, but it was the fact that the municipalities and whatever other governmental entities were actually losing tax money on this as well.
Correct. And in particular, hotels were not happy. Marriott Corporation was way ahead of everyone else in taking a look at this and saying, down the road, this is not going to be good for us. So I remember they were in the room that day asking very good questions, almost like, how do we do this model? And are you familiar with how Airbnb got started originally?
No.
It's a great story.
We would have had to be prepared and research.
I bet it was over. Alcohol was involved.
I don't know. They don't say that. However, a couple of college students in San Francisco saw postings on the billboard that said there was a huge convention coming into town, and they were short of hotel rooms, if anybody had any rooms to offer up. So they said, you know what? We have an extra bedroom. Let's see if we can rent out our bedroom. We have a couple of air mattresses, and we'll feed people breakfast and see if it works. Well, it was so successful. The next convention, they called their friends and said, you really got to do this. So it was truly an air mattress and breakfast in the morning. But some of the sticking point right now is that these two young men lived in that house and they rented out a room. So our concern here, and it has been in other places that have been living with Airbnb legislation, is that investors are coming in and buying up streets and properties and not living there, not renting out a spare bedroom. So that changed the dynamics of it greatly.
Well, at that point, they don't have any skin in the game, if you will. The people that are there had a loud party and they were smoking dope and screeching their tires and stuff like that. Okay, I don't care. They're gone at the end of the month, and right. So they're not living with the neighbors. So you've got a property value situation, correct?
Sure, absolutely, and it's just gotten to the point where New York City is now fining people if they don't follow their additional legislation that says this must be your primary residence.
Okay, I want to take a quick step back. Why is Visit Annapolis concerned about this and the hotel tax? And I guess it's into your funding. How are you funded? And a lot of your funding comes from the hotel tax, correct? Mm-hmm.
It does. Most of our funding does. In 2008, I guess, we started talking about the fact that I inherited a $1.2 million budget. And I know that sounds like a lot of money to people, but it was from partnerships and memberships and advertising sales and a state grant. But those folks that we competed against in the marketplace, Charleston at that time, maybe it was $6 million. Newport, Rhode Island, $5 million. Williamsburg, $18 million.
And they're all the same size as us, too.
They're relatively the same size, but their ability to double, triple, and quadruple the amount of advertising dollars that they had really hurt us, because those are the same cities people go to if they come to Annapolis. The problem was they didn't know Annapolis existed. I don't know how many times people congratulated me on getting a job in Indianapolis. They just didn't know.
There was a commercial about the Final Four on that one.
So there was a great commercial. They just didn't know. So I began this effort to increase the marketing grant that we were getting from the county and also from the state so that we could get competitive. It took 1 year of hard work to get that legislation in place. And at the time, we were the only jurisdiction in Maryland that had our hotel tax revenues legislated. So it couldn't be touched unless somebody wanted to go in and open the legislation. Baltimore City has to appeal for a grant every year. Many other communities do. So we then had the freedom to just market. And
Right.
Our numbers, just in number of visitors, hotel rooms, click-throughs for digital advertising, all of that just went through the roof.
Well, I think you can look and see the effects of that just in the number of hotels that have popped up around here. I'm not saying that we've got this dearth of hotels, but we do have a lot of hotels that weren't here 10 or 15 years ago. You've got the Westin. You've got
Sure.
I want to say the O'Callahan, but the Hilton Garden Inn and Suites.
Doing very well, yes.
And certainly some of the ones out along the outer line areas of this. And your job is not necessarily just Annapolis either, although that is sort of the focus, if you will, or the center. But you've got South County, you've got West County, you've got the Arundel Mills.
Having our budget go from 1.2 to 3.9 really addressed all of that, John. We did not have the monies to really sell the BWI Arundel Mills destination. Just as Live was being built, Arundel Mills was completed and doing very well. Medieval Times, all of that product was there. The airport starting to do really well. What this money did was allow us to have two marketing strategies. One that sells the BWI Arundel Mills area with separate target marketing, separate advertising, separate logos, and so on. And then also to do Annapolis and South County.
Sure.
And we have great partners in the Arundel Mills and BWI area because of that.
Right.
And, I'm always happy that large companies, Marriotts of the world, they can generally advertise for themselves, but we really touch those mom and pops that we just have so many of in this county and across the state and the country. Those are the folks that don't have money to market. So we've even changed our membership structure to be more of a partnership. If you don't have the money to market with us, we're still going to market you if we think you're a product that attracts visitors. That's helpful to you.
Sure.
And necessary to keeping people alive. So we're not telling people to go to your restaurant necessarily, but we're marketing this destination to people who are foodies, for example. And when they get here, they may go to your restaurant. So that money freed us to really market the destination and get in front of people.
Well, it's funny you talked about it, and you said Marriott had said that this may be a problem down the line. And I'm looking at some of the revenues from we'll say the short-term stays, which would include hotels and Airbnbs since 2016. I mean, it sort of speaks to the success of Visit Annapolis, but in 2016, it was $50.2 million, and in 2018, it was $59.2 million. So you've got a 2-year growth, you've got 10% or $10 million roughly. And as I look at the Airbnb percentage of that, 11% in 2016 versus 23% in 2018. So that is really growing exponentially as people are finding out that, hey, I can rent out a room or rent out my entire house for a weekend, a night, or a week.
And I love having that. As a destination marketer, I like to have as many options as possible for visitors. Many people only travel by home rentals. Others only go to hotels, campgrounds, and so on. So the more product I have, the better it is to get people to visit here. So I'm fine with all of that. The discussion that's come up and a little bit of the frenzy that we stirred last week really has to do with the taxes. And one of the council folks asked me a question, and I was very happy he asked because I had an opportunity to answer it. And his question was, isn't there a cost to having visitors come here? What is that cost? And in our industry, we don't look at it that way. We look at the money that comes in from visitors is brand new money that would never be here. It's not business to business. It's not moving people around. It's brand new people who come here and they leave money and they go home. And as I said at the council meeting, we are the largest generator of sales taxes from travel and tourism in the state of Maryland. So that money goes into much of that money, hotel tax money in particular, goes into the general funds. So if I receive $3 million, the city and the county is receiving anywhere in the neighborhood of $14 to $16 million a year. That money is just general fund.
General fund for
pays
whatever they need.
Teachers' salaries. The average person living in Anne Arundel County would be paying over $1,000 more annually in taxes if we did not have this tax that comes in.
No, okay, so now we're talking about a 7% tax on hotels.
Correct.
And if successful, this would go through to the Airbnbs as well. And I sort of want to put a note out here. This is not a tax on an Airbnb owner. This is not a tax on a homeowner, correct?
Absolutely correct.
This is the guy that's coming in.
It's not a new tax. It's a pass-through. Just like staying at a hotel, when you check out, your folio reads the cost of the room, any amenities you charge, then it says city, sales tax, lodging tax. It's the same, and it's already in the legislation. This is not a new piece of legislation that we need to have.
And again, if I've got my room I'm renting out for $100 a night, and Tim's got his room renting out for $200 a night, adding 7% onto both of us is not going to make a difference. We're still as competitive as we've always have been.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a pass-through to the client, to the guest, who understands this, who is used to this. So it is not a new tax, the big T word that people are all afraid of.
Well, I think what had happened was, and a lot of this happened on the Eastport Forum, which is a great place to watch where the debate, where people's heads are. So you had people who were making money with the Airbnbs. And I'm a big fan of Airbnb. I'm a big fan of Uber because I don't like taxis in town. I don't like taxis anywhere. And I'm not a big fan of the hotels that cost an absolute fortune, especially when I have visitors coming, as beautiful as they are. And I think that's why they're booming right now, is because they found a niche and they found the weakness in a lot of these business models. And so that's why they're absolutely booming. And people are making money doing this. So the outcry was yet another tax. You can't leave well enough alone. Why does the government have to have its hands in everything? And there's a part of me that agreed with them until you break it down and you say, because you're already paying that tax anyway when people are coming in. It's not you. It's the visitors who are paying that. And this isn't a new tax. It's something that funds general operations and especially in the town.
That money goes back, much of it goes back to the city and the county. And that's what I would like to get across to local folks. We do profile studies, and we'll be doing another one at the end of this year, showing exactly how much money comes in. And if you look at the formula the city and the county have mandated, how much is spent on education, firefighter salaries, and so on, you see where that money fits in. So it's important. It's also important to know that we have hotel taxes because hoteliers started wanting hotel taxes. They went to city governments and said, look, we'll be willing to tax our guests if that money goes to marketing the destination and bringing more visitors here. So I think it's funny, people don't realize it was actually the hoteliers who started 30, 35 years ago, taxing their own guests so that money would be used to bring in more guests. And what we're saying to homeowners, many who are using this additional revenue to pay mortgages, I mean, the average rental is something like 1 or 2 weekends a month. It's not a lot, but we still feel the fairness factor is collecting that tax. That is a pass-through. and it goes into all of the funds that we've talked about for the benefit of local residents. In addition to that, we need to have some permitting requirements so that at least annually, the city or the county comes in and makes sure the place you're staying in is safe. And now we have 4 or 5 pieces of legislation in Maryland that address both of those things. So the taxing is important to the residents of this community more than anyone. Even the money that I will receive will go back to marketing to bring more visitors. And, when asked what I would do with additional monies, I'm not necessarily looking at buying new ads. What I'm looking at is something that those in my industry are all looking at now, really helping communities work on the infrastructure of their city, because if it's good for the visitor, it's good for the resident as well. And I know our current mayor has a lot of great ideas. They have to be funded. So this is money that could go into, and I would love
Ferris wheels don't pay for themselves.
I'm sorry?
Ferris wheels don't pay for themselves.
No, they don't, do they? We may not all agree with all the ideas, but if there were a base in many cities that have convention centers, for example, which we don't have, but as an example, they take a piece of the hotel tax money and they put it into one fund. Some cities have $250,000, $500,000 in a fund. And when they have an opportunity to bring in a large sporting event or any kind of group for the convention center, they go into that fund and they say, well, let's see, how much revenue is this going to generate back to the city if we help them pay for transportation or we help pay for the cost of the convention center? And that money is used to incent people to come. That's part of the tourism infrastructure that we lack at the moment.
Step back a little bit. You had mentioned about permitting and whatnot. And again, that's the 7% tax is going to be transparent. Airbnb is going to handle that in their transaction. You do it on the app, and at some point they're going to write a check to somebody that's going to divvy it up to whoever needs to have it. Where do you see legislation proposing reaching out that other people are going to call a tax, whether it be a fee or whatever? What are we looking at? Maybe an annual fee to register as an Airbnb provider and inspections for safety and whatnot. And again, that's a huge thing because I certainly don't have the safety, the fire extinguishers and everything else that's maybe needed to keep a public safe in my house.
And I think that's part of the argument. If I don't want to have a fire extinguisher, why should someone make me have a fire extinguisher? However, we live in a community that we are constantly concerned about fire hazards and so on. We're looking at people who are renting for a night or a weekend, little less concerned about whether or not they left garbage outside or whatnot. So we need to have some kind of inspection. Some cities and communities are biannually, some are annually. That just says the place will be safe. For one example, we can't control people's actions, but we can at least assist in something in a community our size. Or some parts of Anne Arundel County, we have communities where folks are renting out their house for the weekend and they're advertising party house, 25 to 30 people.
That was that Washington Redskins football player up in Gambrels. I remember.
And that's not good for the makeup, the characteristics of that community that people moved into and invested money in. So a lot of it it's a holistic.
So you had mentioned in the meeting last week that Prince George's County is sort of a poster child for their legislation that they have. What is their legislation that is so good and so attractive as far as you're concerned?
Primary residence. That must be your primary residence. You have a maximum of, I'm going to forget here now, I think it's 60 days that you can rent your property, which means it is a primary residence pretty much. They are attempting to, and they're collecting lodging tax, they are attempting to get lists of guests who stay at your property, just like hotels do, so that they can find a way to make sure that everything is correct in what they're being told.
Hotels provide guest lists to...
Not to citizens, but they collect that information.
Right, okay.
And Airbnb has not been willing to share that. But Prince George's County is very modest, I think, in what they're asking. Their permitting is annually. And you asked me earlier the cost of permitting. I don't know what permitting costs in a community if you own a restaurant or a hotel, but it would be something absorbed by the homeowner.
If I'm reading this correctly, I'm looking at the Rockport report, and it said that in 2018 there was $13,625,502 in market revenue. Now, market revenue, is that what Airbnb paid to, or what was collected on behalf
Sure. Yes.
of the 502 properties that were part of that in what is considered Annapolis, which is sort of like a loose definition of it. So, I mean, Hillsmere, Bay Ridge, your neighborhood would be considered that,
Yes.
even though it's not truly in the city. All things being equal, we've rented the same nights, we've got the same house, the same days and everything else. The average is $27,142 per property.
Say it again?
$27,142 per property.
On an annual basis.
Yeah, does that sound right, or is my math way off?
No, that's exactly what you're seeing there was what he found out from a variety of sources to come up with those numbers.
So
I'm gonna start renting
realistically,
out my room.
$13 million, which is either paid to the consumer or paid to Airbnb. I know Airbnb takes a little slice, so it may be 14, whatever. But with 502 properties, if you divide that into that, you should get what the average is per.
Well, realize that there really is no average, though.
Right. I mean,
there are. If you go onto Airbnb and you just look up Annapolis properties, there's one home near the Naval Academy, for example, where they took their basement and they made an apartment out of it, and they rented for $290 a night. It's beautiful. There are other people who are renting out a bedroom for under $100
Sure.
a night. So some people are making a business out of it.
But again, on the average, I mean, and I looked at one thing that struck out at me is Arnold. 32 properties with $1.5 million in revenue. That works out to $48,900 a year, which is a solid income. It's not extra income.
And that's not going to, and you average is you probably, like Connie says, probably a couple of them are bedrooms and a couple of them are full houses. So we're averaging it out, but the reality is that probably
right.
some of those properties are making probably over six figures.
And I think that's part of the questioning here. It's whether not taxing people or infringing on their rights, but we all moved here for the character of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, and we want to make sure that remains. I've told folks who live here, if you want to rent your home during commissioning week and take that money and go to the Bahamas, have at it. I think that's great. That's not what we're talking about. It's been done forever. We were the disruptors probably years ago. It's been done forever. That's okay. We are looking for investors who are coming here to make money on properties, and they're just, every day I hear a new example of that. Soon that changes the character of the community, which is why in New York, they said that doesn't happen. You cannot buy a street of homes and rent them all out. You must be a primary resident because that's who cares about the property. So you're giving examples, John, of people who are making it a business. Now, that's another question. When does it become a business? And that means if you have a business, you have other responsibilities or permitting, or I don't know that. We're just trying to at least start with the fairness of appreciating the community in which you have a home you're renting and respecting that.
Well, here's something, and you probably don't know this answer either. Is this reportable income, or is that up to the person that's receiving it? I mean, is this going to be a big pushback? It's like, oh, hell, if I'm getting a permit and I'm getting inspections and Airbnb is collecting taxes and sending they're going to know I made $48,000.
I want to say if it's in this report, has been reported because the report came from TripAdvisor, HomeAway, Airbnb, all of those specifically. So this is money that they are collecting. And if you are on Airbnb, for example, you're listing, you must have a license permit number or they don't allow you to be on their site. Now, it doesn't happen here because we don't have those. So I'm going to say my judgment would be that they are reportable because Airbnb knows who those folks are. We don't.
So you would think the average person, I've never rented my place, and I don't know whether you have, but I mean, would you think the average person that has rented the room is probably reporting that income on income tax at the end of the year?
I can't say that.
I'd say no.
I mean, does Airbnb issue a 1099?
If you're renting your home, commissioning week,
no, they wouldn't.
Are you reporting that? I don't know.
They wouldn't be issuing a 1099 because they're only taking a part of that. So they're only taking a piece of.
That's right. They're taking their commission.
Yeah,
well, and we've just not been collecting taxes that have been on the books as law. So it's impossible to knock on everyone's door and say, are you renting your home? But what this allows us is to use the platforms where you are registering, where you have to have a license permit number, where you have to follow guidelines of ordinances within that community. So we're able to collect that monies and also monitor an X number of properties that are being permitted. However, we don't know the names of those folks. We don't know the addresses specifically because Airbnb does not give that information out, and I understand that.
But that essentially it gives you like the blue check on Twitter or the blue check on Facebook saying that you are a permitted property, and that gives the consumer that's renting an Airbnb a little bit more peace of mind, I would think.
I would hope so, sure.
As opposed to, Billy Bob's basement.
Well, it goes to a sense of fairness, and that was my point is I would rather walk home 5 miles and take a cab in town. I don't like the cabbies. I don't like the way they do business. I don't like the condition of the cabs. Like I said, the hotels are expensive, and I know people who run them, and they're all fantastic. So I love these two models. So I very reluctantly bring up the fact that I have to defend the cabbies and the hotel owners when they say, why do we have to jump through these hoops when it comes to inspections or buying medallions? And you have these folks who come in and are making good money and taking business away from us that don't have to do any of this. They don't have to be inspected. So who knows if they're in the condition? So I reluctantly agree with them. It's a sense of fairness to me. We have a woman who lives near me that makes crab dip, and you pay $20 for this incredible crab dip. And someone mentioned does she have inspections? I said, look, she's not doing this on a large scale. It's kind of a side gig. I doubt she makes, a few $100 a month, if that, from that. But when you have people who are doing this as a business and they're making a ton of money, and it's tax money that should be paid, and I'm not looking for a heavy hand with taxes, but this goes to pay for roads. It goes to pay for everything that I use.
It absolutely does. Absolutely does. And it is that huge sense of fairness. And that's why there were arguments with cabs and hotels and so on. It's a sense of fairness. But you know what else? Beyond that, this kind of competition is good for the consumer. I read in the business journals that I get about new concept hotels. One, for example, you go to that hotel and you can rent 3 or 4 rooms together, not separate rooms, but they're all connected like you would at a home, at an Airbnb home. And it has a kitchen and so on. And they'll give you a range of pricing. So you can decide to pay anywhere from $125 to $250 per night for that space based on what you use. Well, I didn't use the pool, so I don't want to pay for that. And I didn't use, and I don't want. So what's happening is hotels are getting into this business of making people more comfortable, knowing that people want to be with their families. The reason so many homes are rented during commissioning week, and I talk to folks, parents all the time, is they're bringing in 15 or 20 people. So they rent 2 houses, and they can afford to do that. And the grocery stores love it because people are cooking at home. And so my point here is that all of this is good. All of it is good. It attracts more people, brings in more revenue. If you're renting out your house once a month or a week a month, that gives you more money to spend within the community or anywhere. So it's all good. It's just that, along with the goodness, we need to make sure that people are protected, are safe, taxes are collected, so that goes back into the funds for the citizens here. It's not is this a good idea or a bad idea? It's an idea. It's out there. Let's make sure we're all benefiting from the outcome.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break. And when we get back, I want to talk about all these unscrupulous guys that are owning lots of properties and pretty much what the city and the state might be missing out.
Why are you looking at me?
Very few things in life are so precious and so irreplaceable that we all must do our part to protect them. The Chesapeake Bay is one of those things. You can do your part by contributing to the Chesapeake Bay and Endangered Species Fund. It's that little line item you'll see at the very end of your Maryland tax return. Any amount you give makes a difference, and it's tax deductible. I'm Peter Francho, Maryland Comptroller. Our bay and rivers thank you. Learn more about the Chesapeake Bay Trust at cbtrust.org.
When you're a community bank, you help your community however you can. Like being there for local business people, backing them up when they start up, advising them when they ask, standing by them so they can grow. Helping local businesses is one of the most important things we do at Severn Bank. I'm Alan Hyatt, chairman of the bank, but I'm also a proud supporter of businesses in Anne Arundel County. You know we never forget that here at the bank, we're a local business too. We face the same challenges and opportunities as any business, and we know how fortunate we are to have customers who stand beside us. That's why we stand beside you. If you have a business or you want to start a business, talk with us, because we're banking on you. Severn Bank, here with you.
Online at severnbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Severn Bank is a trade name used by Severn Savings Bank.
I guess buying these homes and buying these properties for investment, and it's like 34% is what they estimate of the Annapolis market, are not primary homes.
Correct. From the study, yes. Why that says to me we need to do something about this legislatively is that you said 34% are investors coming in and opening these businesses essentially with no restrictions, no permitting, no business license. That's very different from you, John, saying, Uncle Al, come and see us next weekend. We have 2 bedrooms for you and your family.
Well, in their defense, it's probably a lot easier to open a business that way than it is to go through the permitting process that the city has. But that's
that's a whole other.
Right. We'll leave that.
No, we need to make the city accountable to that as well. If this is happening and we're trying to control it with some permitting and taxing and so on, the city also needs to be there and make sure permitting process is simple enough that people can go through.
I don't think there's a mayor that can change that. I've come to that conclusion.
In this community?
We've had every mayor is aware of this, and they've all tried. I don't think there's a mayor in this little town. I think we have a tiny bureaucracy, and it's a few people. I think it's a handful of people who control the business climate in this town who are just that so-called deep state.
There were suggestions during the election to take names of who, as you went through the permitting process, where did you get your roadblock?
Right.
Was it Connie DelSignore? Was it Tim Hamilton? Was it John Fernet? Where was the roadblock? And see what name comes up a bunch. Mm-hmm. and that's where you probably need to start.
But someone has to be willing. You're so right. Somebody has to be willing to address these things. I've said to the aldermen, a couple of the aldermen that I know a little better than others, just do the right things. You're obviously not an alderman because you need this salary. So if you don't get reelected, you don't get reelected. We need people who are strong enough to make the right decisions, make sure things follow through. Permitting is one of those, as you said, we've been trying forever. But we're not, none of us are against investment. I'm thrilled every time I see someone wanting to invest in this community. It's only positive. But there are hoops you must jump through. And I think it's for the good of everyone that there are those restrictions that everybody doesn't just open up a shop. You can't put a food truck downtown. Why? Because there's an ordinance against it. So there's a reason for that. We don't want to change the personality of the community.
Well, John's joking, but actually that's a very good point. Isn't it easier to have an Airbnb or drive an Uber than it would be to be a cabbie or have a hotel or B&B? Mm-hmm. It absolutely would be.
Yeah,
certainly. No. The B&Bs, they have a right to be concerned because there are something like 4 pages of restrictions within the city of Annapolis on owning a B&B and what you can and cannot do.
But the bed and breakfast, they do have a right to be really ticked off.
I would be if I were them.
Of course they do.
More so than the hotels,
It just
probably
gets back to the fairness issue, Tim. It just has to be fair. And the B&Bs we have here are lovely, and people enjoy them. Unfortunately, we don't have more of them because it's a hard way to make a living.
It is. I know I've spoken with Ellie Tierney, who's one of our aldermen in the city of Annapolis, and she's gone from a fairly lucrative construction project management type of a thing down to an Airbnb owner, and it's not an easy way. You've got obviously running the hotel and being a hotelier, but you've also you've got to repair the roof, you've got to replace the bedding, you've got to.
And if you're a hotelier, you have people. You have an B&B, it's you, your husband maybe, your
dog. You don't have that
or
marketing
somebody.
budget. You don't have that name. People, if they're going to go somewhere, they're going to Google the town, they're going to Google lodging, and they're going to come up with, because of the SEO, that it's going to be Marriott, it's going to be anyone else.
And you have to make sure, everybody is on social media. You have to make sure your ratings stay high because it's clean and it's a pleasant experience. And we just want fairness.
Why do you think people would go to an Airbnb? I was just thinking about this. I know the advantage is for an Airbnb over a hotel. It's because you have a unique space. It's more homey. It might be better located. Mm-hmm. It's certainly cheaper. But what's the advantage to that over a regular B&B?
There are several reasons that I read about in every city, and I think what's unique to us is that you can be in a hotel or an Airbnb in the city of Annapolis and have the same wonderful experience of walking here and there. So it's not quite as noticeable here, except for the rate that you'll pay.
Plus,
but
in
in
New York
many
City, you're not going to have any B&Bs.
In many communities, people just can't afford to rent 3 or 4 hotel rooms. So they rent a house. They can have the whole family there. They can save money by cooking there. Some people just want the experience.
Well, that's something that's happening with travel in general, is that
it's experiential.
The evil millennials that we like to call them. But I mean, the young adults that are out there now, they're so not into the hotel and they're into living the experiences here. I mean, I think a 24 or 25-year-old coming to Annapolis is much more apt to turn around and say, I've got a fixed amount of money. I'm going to spend the bulk of it getting drunk at O'Brien's and partying downtown, and we'll crash at a cheap Airbnb as opposed to staying at the Hotel Annapolis or the Westin or the...
But all of my research says that everyone wants that experience, an experience, and it crosses all ages, so that folks my age are wanting.
Oh, the spring chickens.
They're not. Yeah, the really, really young.
The really young ones.
So we may not want to get drunk each night, but we want to experience the place, which is why travel has become so experiential, is the term that we use, because people want to experience what's real. We have a new website called Annapolis Discovered, and it's local people writing real stories about real people and places and things to do in Anne Arundel County. And it's amazing how many people visit that site. And it crosses all ages.
It's a good site. You got great videos and you've got little reviews of places, and it's fun to.
And there are as many millennials right now as there are seniors. Right?
Yeah, 81 million boomers, 81 million millennials.
Yeah, and they all want to experience
I'm Gen Xer. I'm 20
We're all
million.
Healthier. You're in your 60s and you're a healthier 60 than the previous generation. So you want to do things like the millennials do.
Here's something interesting. Did you know that boomers are more tech savvy than millennials? Millennials know their phones, but they don't know computers nearly as well and the internet nearly as well as the baby boomers do. So when
probably because we have to study harder to figure it out.
Well, because so if you're thinking about stuff like this, where you have to go and research on a website, airlines and hotels and Airbnbs, that boomers are going to be much more savvy than.
Well, that's because we had to learn it.
Yeah, we had to learn it.
And it's presented to them. I mean, everything makes it so much easier. I heard somebody tell me, said that today's kids, and I mean, I'm not dissing on the millennials, but I mean, just society in general, we turn around, we're spending our lives looking at a piece of glass and tapping on it.
And we want everything quickly. This report that we just did, I handed out printed copies, and people wanted to know if they could have it electronically.
Sure.
These were not 19-year-olds. These are older people.
I'm looking around to see if there's a fax machine in here.
Yeah, no, there isn't. But everybody wants information fast.
Right.
And I think that has to be why boomers are using it just as much as anyone else. And which is why we still do print advertising. We're going to be doing $600,000 worth of print advertising this spring in O Magazine, Southwest, Amtrak, in addition to digital advertising. People like to get their information in different ways. We did a lot of TV the last couple of years. So trying to reach people in the way they prefer getting information.
Well, and marketing a destination too is a purely visual type of a thing.
Very
so
much
so print does make a lot of sense, as well as television, as well as the digital, where you're able to get your instant gratification, book here, book an Airbnb, book a hotel, whatever it may be.
Well, the nice part of this is, if you think about this, is that once you get all the taxes straightened out and you get all the permitting straightened out and everything is all equal, you've just increased the residency in Annapolis, because there are times my father's come to visit and they've been booked up. We've had to find something with it, and he's a city guy. He wants to be in the middle of it. He doesn't want to be out in the sticks.
Well, you brought up a really good point.
I know.
There are some cities that embrace Airbnbs, like Austin, for example.
Portland.
Because they have a huge arts festival every year. And when they come in, they don't have enough hotel rooms. So they've really worked with Airbnb long before anyone else did. Jacksonville, when they have sporting events, they have people on boats in the water. So they really embrace it as well. So once we get past this new idea, it's, Uber was new. Everything appears to be a new idea. When these disruptors are not new, they are just changing a little bit the way we do business and the way we recreate and do everything within our lives. Once we get over that, it will settle down and we will forget these arguments. I remember the year that I was buying a car, and it was I forget what make car it was, but I said to the dealer, I said, I used to like the old model. I don't like this new model. And he said, everyone said that until they got used to this model. It's just a matter of what we get used to.
Sort of like wives.
I'm not going there.
Nice.
Very nice. What is the city losing? I mean, I'm looking at this. You've collected in 2016, there was $514,000 collected in taxes from the hotels. And that was divvied up among the state, the city, and you.
And the Arts Council.
Jumped up to 971, just over $1 million in $1.4 million in 2018. And projected, when you add in these Airbnb, you're looking at $2.7 million.
Let me give you, that's a great question. Let me tell you exactly what the community and residents are losing by not collecting additional monies. The Arts Council of Anne Arundel County, for example, receives about $300,000 a year from the existing lodging tax. That's 3% over all the taxes legislated. So when you go to an arts show, when you go to Maryland Hall, when you go to the theater, you don't know that they've received grants from the Arts Council that helps them to put on shows, helps them to hire other people, to expand. So that money goes indirectly right back to the community.
And we can thank the people that stayed in town for that.
Absolutely, because it attracts people. The film festival, I think it's the 5th year for the Annapolis Film Festival, which means it's a really viable festival. If you've lasted that long, we spent a lot of energy and money in marketing them. We know exactly the market we want to invite to come to that festival. And guess what? If you live here, you get to go to that festival. But they rely on income from visitors as well as grants, as well as hotel tax receipts. Imagine if there was another $1 million or $2 million brought into the community, where it's going to go. It's going to go to the same places it's been legislated to since 2009.
Well, we sit here and look, and I mean, if this were to go out to the people, one of the messages that I'm seeing right now, today as we're talking, is County Executive Pittman is looking at possibly cracking the tax cap with because now he can tap into that and exceed the cap based if it's used for education purposes. We've got the Kerwin Commission, which is hanging out in the wings, which is going to put a huge strain on school systems statewide to fund different things to bring up the levels of where we need to be. That's going to be postponed for, I think Speaker Bush postponed that for a year or so. But this is going to come down, and this is going to be really, pardon the phrase, but taxing to the school districts statewide. The city of Annapolis just had the $376,000 or whatever it was that they annually got snatched out of the governor's budget. And there's a bill going through to hopefully get $750 tied to the, cost of living or whatever it may be going up forward. But the city is on a tight budget, and we can argue till the cows come home whether they spend it, do it right, and whether they're overstaffed and whatnot. But they are on a tight budget. They aren't flush in money. And to be able to take a portion of this just seems like a no-brainer, especially when we know that there's some significant true taxes coming down. I mean, we're not talking $100, annual permit fee, which we might be talking about for Airbnb, but we're, with the Kerwin question, I mean, we might be talking,
Yes. And when we do our profile studies of who comes, what they spend, and so on, it just, I'm a former school teacher, and it just touches my heart.
What'd you teach?
Elementary school, K through 3. Loved it. Loved the kids. But it just touches my heart that some of this money goes directly to hiring teachers. So if this additional money means we can hire or raise the salary of one more teacher, one more group of teachers, firefighters, you name it, police officers, this is the money, the kind of the silent money that residents don't see. They don't see the tax bill because they're not staying at a hotel. This is the money that comes into the community for these other great things that we all appreciate.
And I don't want to sound like we're justifying this just for the sake of being just a mouthpiece, because we're just coming off a podcast where we were coming out against the minimum wage. So we're looking super right wing right now. And I don't want to look that way. But the reason it concerns me, and like I said, I laid out my arguments when we had a great discussion on the Eastport Neighborhood Forum on Facebook. And my issue is that I have learned that in business, in times of economic stability, that customers cannot be created nor destroyed, which means that if you have a loss of X amount of customers, then your competitor or competitors will show an increase that'll add up to that loss. So if you look at and say that hotel visits are down, and it's down 1% or 0.5%, then that 0.5% is most likely going to be represented in the Airbnbs in and about town, which is not that big of a deal to a hotel because 0.5% is not a big deal and they're used to fluctuations. However, when tax money is based on that and the tax revenues of Annapolis are based on that 0.5% is actually a big deal.
Well, and you realize that my job in receiving hotel tax revenues is to make sure I'm growing this market.
So that's why I'm concerned, is that I'm not a taxation guy. I am not a regulation guy. I'm not for any of those things. But I do have a sense of fairness. And like I said, I do not like the cabbies in town, but I'm a big fan of Uber. But Uber's got to adhere to the same regulations, to the very least, that the cabbies do.
And you see how they've morphed.
Right.
And if you go into
I still wouldn't
cities,
take them. But
if you go into cities, I don't take one here for obvious reasons, but if you go into a city and take a taxi now, how much better they are. All of this is good for the consumer. It's a matter of strengthening every business, not singling out one or another.
So I used an Airbnb here in town a few weeks ago because I had a lot of work to do one night. I had to get out of the house because my family was driving
That's
crazy.
That's not what you told me you were doing.
Yeah. She never showed. And it's the one that's above Preserve. It's the one that's in the picture in the Capitol, and it was incredible. It was, I think, $80 a night. Then it was like $40 cleaning fee, which I thought was a little steep, but I still paid it because it was still, $1.20 at that point. If they had thrown whatever the tax would be, 10%?
7%.
Yeah, 7%. I really wouldn't have sneezed at that. I mean, because you're so used to paying these ambiguous fees and taxes, you don't even know what they are. I really wouldn't have thought that was a big deal, to be honest with you.
Plus, the tax is reasonable. Every once in a while, a public official comes up with this idea that we could have more money if we just raised the tax rate. Well, we can't be more than Baltimore City or Philadelphia, or we have to have a reasonable hotel tax rate so that people come here.
Nobody
don't
shops on
notice
taxes,
it.
Though. Nobody shops for
if they don't notice it. If you go into New York and you're paying X amount of dollars, I'm going to use them, or Philadelphia, or any large city, Seattle, and you look at the taxes on top of a $500 room, it really starts to hurt. So
I don't know if anyone...
Don't forget about the resort fee.
We have room... Yeah, that's my pet peeve, that now it's resort fee, even if you're in the middle of a city that doesn't have a resort. They've just called it these names.
My pet peeve is the automatic bill as soon as you touch something in the minibar.
Yes.
One time I went and bought a six-pack. I drank a can, and I bought a six-pack and replaced it.
You thought you were so
And I
clever.
got dinged. I'm like, wait a minute.
You thought you were because you used to be able to do that.
Well, but that also shows a pushback, too. And that's actually, we're joking about it, but that's something that bugs me, is that there's no transparency in hotels or airlines, and I know that there was a big push to make it transparent, and lobbyists got to legislatures and Congress, and
it's
they pushed back. And it infuriates me when I pay for something and then you have all these fees on top of that. So, and I feel that way with hotels generally. And again, I'm not picking on the local ones because I like them, but
always negotiate. Always go in and tell them you don't want to pay the resort fee.
But that's why I would go to an Airbnb as it is right now, because screw you with your fees and your resort fees and all these things. I shouldn't have to negotiate. You advertise this price. Why am I paying all this extra money? So if I go to a Airbnb, I'm paying it up front, and that's what I appreciate.
Well, and so
the industries do these to themselves.
They do, but as a single woman who travels, I always stay at a hotel. I have right or wrong, and I know things happen in hotels as well, but I have this sense that there's someone at the desk and there's security 24 hours.
And I can go on the second floor, whatever it may be.
Exactly. Right. If I need to call for medical help, somebody will answer the phone. I just have this sense of security, and I have a lot of women friends who don't feel that way, but it's a preference, and that's why I'm saying I love having an opportunity to offer people any arrangement they want if we have them. And the properties we have in the community are beautiful. Hotels, Airbnbs, bed and breakfast. The quality is good, and that's what I'm concerned about. But it's an option for people.
I'll tell you, as we wrap up, where is this going from here? Where do we stand as far as this is? I know at the meeting they said it was not a state issue because there's so many different jurisdictions that would be involved that the state couldn't legislate it. It has to be on a local thing. And obviously with the Visit Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, you are concerned with Anne Arundel County and the city of Annapolis. Where does this stand and where do we go from here?
Still, we're in the process. I'm getting, we have an opinion from the Maryland Attorney General on some of the language in the county and state bills and how that affects what happens adding short-term rentals to the taxing structure. We also have an opinion. We have a legislation submitted
I want to interrupt you. See, the state bill. So we're not legislating this on the state, but the state has authorized by legislation to collect the tax and to levy it.
They've authorized for the county to collect the tax.
Okay.
And one of the recipients is the city. Okay. The city cannot decide to put on a tax without working directly with the county. Okay. That's the opinion I just received actually today.
Which is, we talked about that before. Why can't Annapolis just put a 0.25% tax, sales tax? They can't do that.
So the state basically has to change the language of the existing legislation.
The county does. The county ordinance has to change its language.
But you said that, we were talking about a state legislation or the state bill, didn't you?
The state has authorized the county to be the recipient of the taxes, and they can have an agreement with the city. Right now they have an agreement with the city, so the city receives the city taxes. But there's some language in the county code that talks about number of rooms and so on that isn't in the state legislation. So the city and the county need to work to eliminate that language, to change that, so it's all equal.
Okay, so there's nothing on the state level that needs to be done.
That's my understanding right now, but that...
other than maybe adding the word temporary vacation.
That's what we're reviewing with the AG to make sure there is not any more enabling that has to come from the state. Senator Elfreth has been helpful with that. That's what we're working on. Then there are a couple of city aldermen and a couple of county council folks who are drafting legislation. They're working with their lawyers for the city and lawyers for the county and government affairs folks. And so I have not seen the legislation yet.
When might this all come to fruition? Do we have any idea? Just knowing that Annapolis moves so fast and just embraces change so well.
I'm pushing as hard as I can, working with the city manager as well. Teresa Sutherland is very eager to have this happen as well. She's a budget person. So as quickly as we can get everyone...
Teresa goes home and goes, more money.
So if nothing else, I'm acting as the catalyst just to call people and say, do you need anything else from me? Do you need me to talk to Senator Elfreth? Do you just trying to keep it moving along?
So is this something that could be accomplished and in place in a year?
I'm hopeful that it happens this year. I'm not sure with county council, isn't it up until the budget in May that you can introduce legislation, something like that. So we have a few months left. If we don't need the state to do anything, then that's great because they're going to have, 3,300 bills this year or something.
Right. At this point, they've only got 40.
So we could move it more quickly. I think actually the Capital Gazette, you folks have just been really helpful in keeping that, even though some people aren't excited about this legislation, just keeping the dialogue going. And that's what we want. We want those people to call their aldermen and council folks and say, this is a great idea. Let's keep moving on it. So I think they need to hear that.
So as I say it, okay, the pros are the city, the county, I want to say the CVB, but I know you'll give me a dirty look. So Visit Annapolis and Anne Arundel.
There it is.
No.
Well, it's a conference in Visit.
Conference, not convention. Not convention. But, the city of Annapolis, the county of Anne Arundel, the CVB, the Arts Council for Anne Arundel County will all receive more money. Correct. To be able to do things to increase the quality of life theoretically for everybody that lives. Or at
least not lose any. That's
correct. And because at some point, as the study reveals, if we're not collecting this and we have more Airbnbs, at some point, whatever year that is, the hotel tax revenues may decrease.
Another upside is that you're not going to tick off the hotels. You're going to level the playing field for the hotels and the B&Bs that are operating. So everybody's going to be operating on a similar thing. Obviously, I don't think we're going to have the same type of things that the Lowe's hotel has to have in a hotel or in an Airbnb. That's also a plus. The downside is that your rates for your consumer may go up a little bit, 7%, but that's a pass-through tax that's going to be hands-off for the homeowner. This is Airbnb is going to cut the check and send it off to whoever it needs to go.
Correct.
And the only downsides that I'm seeing is a potential fee, which would be determined by the city and the county, I'm presuming separately, for permitting fees to operate one. And then, if there's anything involved as far as improving it for a safety point of view.
And I guess I don't see any downside, John. I see that if people are spending a couple of dollars to get their home safe so that their guests are safe, because it's a liability for them as well, that the tax monies
That's a curious question as to what is the liability? What if I rent out an Airbnb and just have homeowners insurance and there's some kind of crazy fire and somebody dies in that?
Well, Airbnb has lots of information on their websites, and they will drop homeowners if people have complained about staying there and so on. But liability, I don't know. It's such a litigious country that who knows? But at least there's some comfort level if you're going to do this. So I'm seeing it all being positive, and I hope that with information that we're able to do through you and through Tim and others, to say to people, take a look at this. I have the legislation. They're welcome to have, or not the legislation, I'm sorry, the study.
Right.
People are welcome to read it, have an informed opinion, and then please call the council folks, call the mayor, call the county executive, and let them know why you think it's a great idea for the community if you do.
Well, we will put a link to the report into our show notes on here, so when people hear this, they can do that. But again, you're looking at the numbers that people are earning by doing this. Okay, this is a business. And it doesn't matter whether you're earning, $1,500 a year, or as some people probably are, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year. And certainly if you're buying multiple properties to be able to use it as an investment, it is indeed a business. And this is, as the way I look at this, is it's the cost of doing business.
It really is. That's
it makes
why
it fair for everybody.
It's a downside. It is. Of course it is. And, we've been working closely with the Maryland Hotel Lodging Association, as have Montgomery, Prince George's, Baltimore City. So hotels are coming around to the fact that, no, it's not equal in their mind in terms of safety and permitting and so on that they're required to have. But they're happy that we're at least having legislation that makes it a little more fair for folks who want to stay in a private home.
Fantastic. Well, Connie DelSignore, the CEO of Visit Annapolis and Anne Arundel, which is the Conference and Visitors Bureau here in Annapolis. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for all that you do. And, certainly I do recommend everybody go to visitannapolis.org and check out everything else that they've got there. They've got a bunch of wonderful local blogs, which are fun. You always see somebody that probably writing or videoing, or when they go out into one of the local establishments, you see somebody, and it's always kind of fun to do. And sniff around there and find out all the different things that Anne Arundel County has. I always am a fan of being a tourist in your hometown. I like to take Debbie Gosselin's boats every now and then and listen to what their people are talking about, and you learn a little bit of history, or whether you're walking onto the Naval Academy, or even out in West County watching out Brack and Arundel Mills. And
there's a lot going on, and we're not selling ourselves as a quick weekend getaway anymore. We're selling the idea that you could spend 4 or 5 days in Annapolis, headquarter here, and then go to Baltimore for a day, go to D.C., see the monuments, but stay here because it's beautiful and we have great properties. So
I was talking to my girlfriend last night about how lucky we are that with BWI, 20 minutes from Annapolis.
Oh my, we are so lucky.
And it's one of the cheapest airports in the nation to fly in and out of. So it's with Southwest, they've just been a great partner for the county.
Sure.
Connie, thank you very much. And
my pleasure.
Let's go Airbnb.
All right, let's go.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you, guys.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them at all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.